The air in South Boston had that sharp, metallic bite that only the first real snow brings. It clung to the wool of my thin coat, smelling of cold pavement and the distant harbor. I pulled the collar tighter, my gaze fixed on my daughter, Maya. She was 6 years old, and the snow was magic to her. She was trying to catch flakes on her tongue, her small, mittened hand slipping out of mine. I had just finished my shift at Rossi's bakery. The scent of yeast and burnt sugar still clung to my apron, a stark contrast to the freezing air. We were walking the 3 blocks home, past the brick row houses and the sodium orange glow of the streetlights. "Mommy, look." Maya, my Maya, was standing on the bottom step of a brownstone we passed every day. She was holding something dark and heavy. My stomach did what it always does when the routine breaks. It dropped. "Maya, what is that? Put it down. You do not know where it has been." She held it up. It was not just dark. It was expensive. A man's wallet, black leather, thick. Heavy enough to be a weapon, it looked obscene sitting in her small, red mittens. "Someone lost it," she whispered, her eyes wide with the gravity of the discovery. I looked up and down the street. It was empty. The snow was falling faster now, blurring the edges of the world. "Give it to me, honey." I pulled my own gloves off, my fingers stiffening instantly in the cold. The leather of the wallet was smooth, like water over stone. It had no branding, just quality. I flipped it open. My breath caught. I was looking at a stack of cash that could cover our rent for 6 months, maybe 8, all $100 bills. My hand, the one that kneaded dough and wiped counters, was shaking. "Is it a lot of money, Mommy?" "It is," I said, my voice tight. I forced myself to look deeper. There was a black, heavy card with no name, just numbers. And behind that, a photograph. A young boy, maybe 7 or 8, sitting on the shoulders of a man. The man was wearing a thick wool coat, and his eyes were the color of the Boston Harbor in January. Cold, deep, and final. Tucked into a side pocket was a single, heavy card. It did not have a name or a number, just embossed words, "For honesty, gratitude is a promise." A promise. In South Boston, a promise was a debt, and a debt was a chain. I snapped the wallet shut, the sound too loud in the quiet snow. But I had seen the most important part, a thin, metal plate set into the leather. It read, "Domenico Valente." My blood did not just run cold, it froze solid. There are names in this city you hear in whispers, names that own the silence. Valente was not a whisper. It was the silence itself. "We have to give it back." "We?" Maya said, her voice firm. I looked at the money, then at my daughter. "Honey, this is complicated." "Mrs. Peter said finding something and keeping it is the same as stealing. And we are not stealers. Mommy, we are hearts. We have integrity." She was 6 years old and using words like integrity that she learned in kindergarten. And she was right. And her righteousness terrified me. "You are right," I managed. We will figure out how to return it." I looked around again, a prickle moving up my spine. The street was not as empty as I thought. Across the road, parked just outside the pool of light from the street lamp, was a large sport utility vehicle. Black. Of course. The windows were tinted so dark they looked like polished obsidian. As I watched, the headlights flashed once, twice. It was not a greeting. It was not an accident. It was a signal. It said, "We see you." My heart hammered against my ribs. They were not looking for the wallet. They were waiting for it. I shoved the wallet deep into the pocket of my apron, still tied around my waist beneath my coat. I grabbed Maya's hand. "We are going home now." "But the wallet, Mommy." "We will take it with us. We will be safe inside." We had not taken 2 steps when a man detached himself from the shadows of the alley beside the brownstone. He was tall, thin, and moved with a silence that was unnatural. He wore a simple dark coat, but his stillness was louder than any threat. He blocked our path. He looked at me. his eyes bypassing me almost, as if I were just a piece of furniture. "Did you drop something, ma'am?" His voice was flat, no accent, no emotion. I held Maya behind my leg. My mouth was dry. I thought of the $100 bills. I thought of the cold eyes in the photograph. I thought of the blinking headlights. "No," I said, my voice surprising me with its steadiness. "I did not, but I think someone dropped a promise." The man's expression did not change, but something in his focus sharpened. He recognized the word. He simply nodded. Once, and then he stepped back into the alley. He did not leave. He melted. I ran the rest of the way home, pulling Maya along. We scrambled up the 3 flights of stairs to our apartment, my keys fumbling in the lock, the smell of our tiny room, old wallpaper, Maya's crayons. The faint scent of the curry our neighbors were cooking was the smell of safety. I locked the deadbolt. I latched the chain. And then my phone, sitting on the kitchen counter, buzzed. I never get texts from numbers I do not know. It was not a number. It was just a string of digits. The message contained only a location and address in the North End and 5 words. "Bring the wallet. Come with the child." Come with the child. The air left my lungs. It is one thing to be seen by a ghost. It is another for the ghost to know you have a daughter. I looked at the phone, then I looked at Maya, who was hanging her wet coat on the hook, oblivious. In Boston, there are no coincidences. There are only arrangements and consequences, and the Valente family did not do coincidences. They were consequences. Dropping a wallet outside the bakery where Elena Hart works, the bakery she leaves at exactly 5:45 every evening, was not an accident. It was an audition. My mind raced. I could throw the wallet in the river, but they knew I had it. They knew where I lived. They knew Maya. I could call the police. I laughed out loud at that, a short, bitter sound. Calling the police about Domenico Valente finding you. That was like reporting a shark for being wet. "Mommy, are we going to return the wallet?" Maya asked. She was looking at me with that clear, unwavering gaze of hers, the one that still believed the world was divided into right and wrong. I looked at her. My beautiful 6-year-old girl who believed in integrity, and I knew I had no choice. I could not run. I could not hide. I could only walk through the door they had opened. "Yes, baby," I said, forcing a smile. "We're going to return it. We will go right now, and then we will come right back home and have macaroni." I put her wet mittens back on her hands. "We go, we give it back, and we come home. That is all." The address was a place with no name, just a heavy oak door painted dark green on a narrow North End street. The restaurant, if it was one, had no sign. I did not have to knock. As we approached, the door opened. The man from the alley. Silas was standing there. He just watched us walk in. The inside was dark, warm, and smelled of old wine and roasting garlic. It was empty of customers. There was only one man, sitting at a table in the back, under a low hanging lamp. He stood up as we approached. He was the man from the photograph. He was wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my apartment building. He was tall, and he held himself with a stillness that matched his man, Silas. But where Silas was empty, this man was full. He was full of shadow, full of quiet power. His eyes were exactly as I remembered them from the photo, cold, deep, and intelligent. He did not look at me. His entire focus went to my daughter. He crouched down, a slow, deliberate movement. He was now eye level with Maya. It was strange. This man, who radiated an aura of absolute control, did not seem frightening to her. "You found something that belongs to me," he said. His voice was low, rough, like gravel wrapped in velvet. It was a voice that was used to giving orders, but he was not giving one now. Maya nodded, stepping slightly forward. She held out the wallet. "We are not stealers." Domenico Valente looked at the wallet, then back at her face. He smiled. It was a small, tight smile that did not reach his cold eyes, but it was genuine. "No," he said. "You are not. Thank you for your honesty." He took the wallet from her. He did not check the contents. He did not care about the money. He straightened up and looked at me for the first time. "Elena Hart," he said. It was not a question. "You know my name," I stated, pulling Maya closer. "I make it my business to know who lives in my city." He gestured to the chair. "Please." I did not sit. "We came to return that. We are leaving now." He ignored me. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a simple white envelope. He slid it across the dark wood of the table. "This is for you, an invitation, for a rare act of decency." I looked at the envelope. "I do not want a reward." "It is not a reward," he said, his eyes holding mine. "It is a consequence, a good one. They are rare." I picked it up. It was heavy, expensive cardstock. Inside, there was a card edged in gold leaf. It was an invitation for one person, for lunch, tomorrow at noon. It gave another North End address. At the bottom, a sentence was written in beautiful script: "A safe lunch, a different life." I almost laughed. The cold air, the fear, the sheer audacity of it. A safe lunch. "In Boston time," I said, my voice shaking just a little. "Safe is the most dangerous word I know. It usually means the person saying it is holding the knife." Domenico Valente actually smiled at that. This time, it almost touched his eyes. "You are not wrong, but you're not entirely right either. Safe, for you, has meant hiding. It has meant surviving. I am offering a different kind of safe." He knew. He knew about my life. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The dropped wallet was not an audition. It was a summons. "I do not want a different life, for I lied." "Asao. Everyone wants a different life. Miss Hart, they just lack the courage or the opportunity. Tomorrow, at noon, you will have the opportunity. You only need to bring the courage." He nodded toward the door. Silas was already holding it open. We were dismissed. "What if I do not come?" I asked, my hand on Maya's shoulder. Domenico Valente sat back down. He picked up his fork, as if he were preparing to eat. "Then you will have chosen, and you will go back to the bakery, and the 3 flights of stairs, and the life you have, and we will not speak again." He looked up, his gaze pinning me. "But you will come, because integrity," he used Maya's word, "is a heavy thing to carry. It makes you curious. Come to lunch, Elena." I walked out of that restaurant tight, pulling Maya into the snowy night. The air felt colder. The sport utility vehicle was gone. The man named Silas was gone. We walked home, and Maya was quiet. I was quiet. Back in our apartment, I locked the deadbolt in the chain. I made Maya her macaroni. I stood at the window, watching the snow fall on South Boston, holding the heavy gold invitation in my hand. I knew, as surely as I knew my own name, that I would be at that address tomorrow. The thread of fate, which I had tried so hard to avoid, had just been sewn directly onto the sleeve of my cheap, worn-out coat, and a man with eyes like the frozen harbor was holding the other end. The gold invitation felt heavy in my hand, heavier than the cheap cardstock it was printed on. It sat on my small kitchen table, shining under the single buzzing fluorescent light. It looked out of place, like a diamond in a soup kitchen. Maya was asleep in her cot in the corner, her breathing soft and even. She was the only thing in my life that was not complicated. This invitation, this safe lunch, it was a complication I could not afford. Domenico Valente. He knew my name. He knew my situation. This was not an accident. This was a calculation. I was not always Elena Hart, the woman who smelled of flour and industrial floor cleaner. I used to be Elena Hart, anesthesia technician at Boston Community Hospital. I was good at my job. I was precise. I understood the delicate balance between consciousness and oblivion. Then, 2 years ago, the balance tipped. A scandal erupted over missing painkillers, fentanyl, a lot of it. The investigation was swift and pointed. It pointed at me. An anonymous tip, a locker search, a single misplaced vial found in my bag. I did not do it. I screamed it. I cried it. I reasoned it. But I was a single mother, already struggling, and I was the perfect scapegoat. The person who filed the anonymous report, a junior administrator who always seemed nervous, vanished a week later, transferred. They said, "My union representative just shook his head. They want you gone. Elena, take the settlement." There was no settlement. There was just termination. The man who should have stood by me, the man who helped create the beautiful child sleeping in the next room, was Ethan Cole. He was a lawyer. He worked for a firm that advertised fighting for the little guy on the sides of buses. He loved justice, or so he said. He left me 2 weeks before our wedding. He said a case came up, a big one, bigger than love. He had told me, as if that explained everything. He went to Washington, D.C., and never came back. I learned a valuable lesson from Ethan. Law is a wonderful idea, but it often loses to power. Justice is supposed to be blind. But she peaks. But I also learned something else, something I held on to. Evidence does not forget. People lie. Files can be buried, but the truth stays put, waiting. Now, my life was this. A third-floor walk-up apartment in South Boston. The rent was paid weekly, in cash, to a landlord who never fixed the dripping faucet. I worked 2 jobs, the bakery from 5 in the morning until noon. Then I cleaned offices in the financial district from 6 in the evening until 10 at night. Maya was my reason. She was the one pure, uncomplicated truth in my world. Every morning, I woke up in the dark, my feet hitting the cold floor, and the thought of her small, warm hand in mine was the only thing that got me moving. I was 31 years old, but I felt much older. Domenico Valente. In the North End, his name was the 11th commandment. Thou shalt not speak it aloud. You did not talk about the Valente family. You did not ask questions. You just knew. They owned the shipping ports, or at least the unions that ran them. They owned a dozen restaurants, all dark wood and high prices, like the one I had been summoned to. They even ran a charity, the Valente Community Trust. It gave scholarships to kids in the neighborhood and sponsored the St. Anthony's Feast. It put a clean, legitimate face on whatever else they did in the shadows. My only real friend in the city was Nora Alvarez. She was a reporter for a small local paper that was mostly ads for plumbers. Nora was all warmth and quick smiles, but her eyes were permanently skeptical. She was the only person who had listened to my story about the hospital and believed me. She lived on coffee and outrage. Her favorite question, the one she applied to everything from a city zoning change to a new park, was, "Cui bono?" Who benefits? I'd not told her about the wallet. I was not sure I could. My other anchor was Father Michael, down at the old St. Mary's. He was an old Irish priest who had seen too much in this neighborhood. He was the one who arranged for Maya to get into the parish art class for free. He always told me to keep the faith. But even he understood Boston. "Elena," he had told me once, his voice a low rumble, "in this city, God has a complicated payroll. Sometimes he has to use a sinner to get his work done." I had a feeling Domenico Valente was one of those sinners. That man, Silas, the one who moved like smoke. Now that I thought about it, I'd seen him before. He would be across the street from the bakery sometimes, just reading a newspaper, or he would be at the end of the block when I walked Maya to the bus stop. It was never threatening. It was just present. He was always far enough away to be ignored, but just close enough for me to know. I was being observed. I had assumed he was a narcotics detective, or maybe someone from the hospital's insurance company. I never dreamed he was Valente's. This was not a new development. They had been watching me. For how long? I started piecing things together. Snippets of conversation I overheard at the bakery, Nora's complaints about inaccessible city records. There was a Cold War brewing in Boston. It was not the old Irish versus Italian thing. This was new. It was the Valente family, the old shadow power, against a new kind of monster, the Ravello Group. Ravello was a corporate real estate developer. They were everything the Valente family was not: public, polished, and perfectly legal. They wore expensive suits, not shadows. They bought politicians, not silence. They were pushing hard into the waterfront, the same territory the Valentes controlled. They were, as Nora put it, a legal mafia. My eyes drifted to the corkboard above my table. It was the map of my life. Unpaid electric bills, my 2 work schedules, Maya's latest drawing from her art class, a bright yellow sun, a multiplication table she was trying to learn. And in the bottom right corner, a small index card I had pinned there 2 years ago. I had written 3 words on it: truth plus patience equals freedom. It was my mantra, the thing I told myself when the nights were long and the money was short. The truth about the hospital was out there. I just had to be patient enough to find it. Do not get involved. Elena, I whispered it into the dark apartment. Do not get involved. They are not your people. They are not your fight. You have a child to protect. But the gold card lay on the table. It was not a threat. It was, as he said, an opportunity, a legal temptation, a chance to what? He knew my name. He knew my story. This was not about a lost wallet. This was about the Ravello Group. This was about the hospital. This was about my stolen life. Domenico Valente was not offering me a rope to climb out of my hole. He was offering me a shovel. I picked up the card. 12 o'clock. Noon. I turned off the light. I was a mother, and I was terrified. But I was also the woman they had framed. And she was still very, very angry. I would bring my courage, but I would also bring my anger and my memory. A safe lunch. We would see. I told Maya I was taking the day off from the bakery. I called in sick, a luxury I could not afford, but I did not have a choice. I dressed her in her best coat, the one my friend Nora had found at a second-hand store, and I put on the only clean blouse I owned. The address was Casa Aurelia. Unlike the dark, nameless place from the night before, this restaurant had a bright blue awning and windows that shone. It was elegant, but it was also empty. They had closed it for him, for us. Domenico Valente was sitting at a table by the window, a crisp white tablecloth in front of him. He was not in the charcoal suit from last night. He wore a dark blue sweater, the kind of soft wool that made him look less like a boss and more like a professor. But his eyes were the same. They were all business. He stood when we entered. Silas was not there. We were alone with him. Elena, Maya, please. He gestured to the chairs. I sat, placing Maya in the high chair that was already waiting. I am here, I said. I do not have much time. You have all the time I have bought, he said, sitting. He signaled to a waiter I had not even seen. Maya, I am told you like tiramisu. Would you like some? Maya's eyes went wide. She nodded. Her shyness overcome by the promise of lady fingers and cream. He smiled. That same tight, controlled smile. Bring her the tiramisu and bring us the veal. He did not ask me what I wanted. The tiramisu appeared in less than a minute. Maya dug in, her face immediately smeared with cocoa and cream. It was a perfect distraction. Domenico Valente watched her for a moment. A good child. You are a good mother. Is that why I am here, I asked, my hands clasped in my lap, for parenting advice. He looked at me. No, you are here because you were framed. He slid a thin manila file across the white tablecloth. It was not thick, but it felt as heavy as a gravestone. What is this? The truth, he said, or the beginning of it. My fingers were trembling. I opened it. The first page was a photocopy. I recognized it instantly. It was the anonymous tip form from the hospital, the one that named me, the one that described my locker. But I saw something I had never seen before. In the margin, written in a different pen, was a date that was 3 days before the investigation officially started. The report had been backdated. I do not understand, I whispered, but I did. You were set up, Domenico said, his voice low and even. The person who filed that report, the administrator who vanished, he was a compulsive gambler. He had debts. The person who changed that date, the person who made the anonymous tip official and pointed the investigation at you, was an assistant district attorney. He's very ambitious. An assistant DA, my world, which was already small and tilted, felt like it was spinning. Why me? Because you were convenient, And because the people who paid him needed a distraction, the hospital was leaking painkillers. But it was not you. It was a senior doctor, a doctor who was being blackmailed for a cut of the profits by his supplier. The supplier is a man who launders the money through a very specific trust. He leaned forward. The restaurant was silent except for the scrape of Maya's spoon against the glass. "The Ravello Group," he said. The name landed on the table between us, the legal mafia, the men in clean suits. "Ravello," I repeated. "They run a real estate company." "They run everything, Mun," he said, "including the trust that paid the assistant DA to forge that date. They buried you to protect their supply line. It was just business." I felt sick. All this time, I thought it was a simple, petty injustice. I did not realize I was a casualty of a war I did not even know was happening. "Why are you telling me this?" I looked at him, my fear hardening into the anger that had kept me going for 2 years. "Why me?" "Because," he said, "I need something. Something only you have." I laughed. It was a bitter, ugly sound. "I have nothing. I am a single mother with an EBT card and 2 bad jobs. I am not Joan of Arc. I cannot fight the Ravello Group." "I am not asking you to," he said, his eyes intense. "I do not need Joan of Arc. I need Elena Hart. You're not nothing. You are the woman who worked at that hospital for 5 years. The nurses trust you. The orderlies trust you. You are the woman who lives at the docks, who organizes the bake sale for St. Mary's, the longshoremen, the fishermen, their wives. They trust you." He paused, letting his words sink in. "You are real. They know you are one of them. That is a kind of currency I can rarely buy. And it is the one thing I do not have." "Trust for what?" "The Ravello Group is not just poisoning your old hospital," he said. "They are trying to steal this city. They are pushing families out of the waterfront, families that have lived there for 50 years. They are using dirty land deals, shell companies, and a corrupt housing court judge to do it. They want to build luxury high-rises on the graves of this community." He slid something else across the table. It was a single, heavy key. "This is for a storage unit in Southie. Inside are documents, tapes, ledgers, everything I have on their dirty land deals. Every transaction has a financial fingerprint. It is all there." I stared at the key. It was cold. "I do not want your key," I said. "I am not your spy." "I am not asking you to be," he said. "I am asking you to be a door. I cannot go to the press. It becomes a war between families. I cannot go to the police. Ravello owns too many of them. But you can." He laid it out. It was not a request. It was a strategy. "You take this key. You take the evidence. You go to your friend, Nora Alvarez. She is the press. You go to Father Michael. He is the community. And I," he said, "I happen to know a federal investigator who is very clean and very interested in the Ravello Group's finances. I will provide his name. You will be the one to connect them. You will be the center of the wheel. You will use the law, the real law, to burn them to the ground." It was brilliant, and it was terrifying. He was offering me the head of my enemy on a platter, but he was asking me to be the one to serve it. "Why me?" I asked again, my voice barely a whisper. "You could find someone else, someone cleaner." "I could," he agreed, "but I did not. You know why? Because your 6-year-old daughter found a wallet with enough cash to change her life, and she insisted on returning it." He looked at Maya, who was now nodding, half asleep in her chair, a milk mustache on her lip. "You taught her that," he said to me. "That kind of integrity is not learned. It is built. A person who can build that in a child is a person who keeps their word, a person who keeps a promise." He used his own word now, "is a person who can hold a city." I looked at my daughter, my beautiful, honest child. She had not just found a wallet, she had found a bomb. I looked at Domenico. The veal was sitting untouched in front of us. This was not a lunch. This was a covenant. I had one question, the only one that mattered. "If I do this," I said, my voice clear and cold, "if I agree to be this door, is she safe? Is Maya safe?" Domenico Valente did not hesitate. He did not look away. His cold eyes met mine, and he gave me the truest thing he had. "A second promise," he said. It was more binding than any contract. It was a vow from a man who did not make them lightly. I picked up the key. It was heavy in my palm. I nodded. "Once?" A small smile touched his lips. "Good. Eat your lunch. Elena, you have a busy week." I did not touch the veal. I did not touch the water. I gathered Maya, who was now fast asleep, into my arms. I stood up. As I walked to the door, a thought chilled me to the bone. Who, exactly, is hiding a knife behind this free lunch? I walked out of Casa Aurelia into the bright, cold afternoon. I knew, as I held Maya tight to my chest, that the wheel was turning. The life I had, the one of survival and silence, was over. The honesty of a 6-year-old child had just officially declared war, and I was the soldier. The key Domenico Valente had given me felt like a small block of ice in my coat pocket. I waited for 2 days. My nerves stretched thin as wire. I waited until Maya was safe at St. Mary's for her afternoon art class, the one Father Michael ran. Then I took the bus to Southie, my hands sweating inside my gloves. The storage facility was one of those sprawling, gray places that smell of cold concrete and rust. I found Unit 34B. The heavy steel door rolled up with a sound like a scream, scraping metal against metal. I stepped inside. The air was dead and smelled of dust and old paper. It was not a treasure chest. It was an arsenal. 12 banker's boxes, stacked neatly, all labeled by year. I opened the most recent one. My breath caught. It was not just papers. It was a life's work of meticulous observation. File folders heavy with land deeds, escrow account statements, copies of cashier's checks, and tapes, dozens of microcassette tapes, the kind businessmen and lawyers used before everything went digital. I pulled a thick ledger from the top box. It was not a corporate book. It was a shadow book. It tracked payments, thousands and thousands of dollars, flowing from something called the Ravello Community Trust into a series of offshore accounts. And from those accounts, money flowed back into the private trust of a sitting housing court judge. I finally understood. Domenico Valente had not just been watching his enemy, he had been auditing him. I could not do this alone. I needed Nora, but I could not just walk into her office with a box of dynamite. I went to Father Michael first. He was in the sanctuary, the late afternoon light cutting through the stained glass, illuminating the dust motes dancing around his head. He was polishing the old oak rail. "Elena," he said. He did not turn, but he knew my footsteps. "You look heavy-hearted, child." "I am carrying something heavy. Father," I said, my voice low, "I need your help. And I need the seal of the confessional, but outside the box." He stopped polishing and looked at me, his eyes kind but clear. He knew the difference between a sin and a secret. I did not show him the files. I did not have to. I just told him what I knew, what Domenico had told me, and what the ledger confirmed, that the Ravello group was using a corrupt judge to force families out of the waterfront. He already knew. His anger was a quiet, solid thing. They are parasites. Elena, they are bleeding this neighborhood, dressing it up as revitalization. What can we do? "We can feed the neighborhood," I said, "and we can listen." We called it the Church Kitchen Group, a simple name for a complicated operation. It was me. It was Nora Alvarez. And it was Father Michael. Every Friday night, we set up tables in the church basement. We served soup, bread from Rossi's, and coffee. Ostensibly, it was a hot meal program for families struggling with the rent hikes. In reality, it was the safest deposition room in Boston. Nora, with her disarming smile and her relentless eyes, was brilliant. She would sit with a family, a cup of soup in her own hands. "That eviction notice," she would say. "It just does not look right. Can I see it?" The longshoremen, the shipbuilders, the fishermen, tough men who had lived by the water their whole lives, men who would slam the door on a reporter. They talked to her. They talked to me. They were angry and scared. They brought their letters. They told stories of quiet intimidation, of building inspectors showing up for anonymous complaints, of sudden, impossible rent increases. We were not just collecting names, we were collecting evidence. We were building a case, one bowl of soup at a time. I was not the only one moving in the shadows. Silas reappeared. I was waiting for the bus home from the church, the night air sharp and cold. He did not walk up. He was just there, standing beside me, as if he had grown out of the pavement. "You are predictable," he said. His voice was like stones rolling in the surf. I jumped. "I'm a mother. I have a schedule." "A schedule is a target," he said. "Change it. Take a different bus home, twice a week. Get off 2 stops early and walk. Never talk about this on your phone. If you have to meet Alvarez, put your phone in airplane mode. Better yet, leave it at home." His lack of emotion was terrifying. He was not giving me friendly advice. He was giving me rules for survival. He reached into his pocket and handed me a small, plain notebook and 2 pencils, the kind you buy at a convenience store. "Pencil, when," he said, "ink can be analyzed. Paper can be burned. Digital is forever. Remember that." I looked at him. This man who was Domenico's right hand. "What are you—" "A man who values quiet," he said. And then he was gone, walking into the dark. I started following his rules. I felt foolish. I was a mother, a baker, a cleaner. I felt like I was playing a game. I changed my bus route. I left my phone in my locker when I went to the church. I wrote all my notes about the families in pencil in the little notebook. I was an apron spy. The thought made me want to laugh, but the laughter stuck in my throat. It was not a game. The one place that still felt clean was Maya's art class. Father Michael let me sit in the back while I waited for her. The room was bright and smelled of crayons and that sweet, cheap tempera paint. One afternoon, I looked up and saw her sitting at a small table. Her head was bent close to another child's. They were sharing the blue paint. It was the boy from the photograph in Domenico's wallet. He looked older now, maybe 8 years old. He had a serious, quiet face. He had his uncle's eyes, not cold, like Domenico's, but deep and watchful. Mommy Maya ran over, holding up her painting. "This is my new friend. His name is Luca." Luca looked up from his painting. He did not smile, but he nodded. "Hello, Mrs. Hart." His voice was polite and old for a child. "It is just Elena," I said, my throat suddenly tight. "It is nice to meet you, Luca." I looked at their paintings. They had both painted the same thing, a bridge, a big blue bridge, stretching across a river. "It is the Charles River," Maya announced proudly, "and that is our bridge, so Luca and I can visit each other's houses." I felt a chill. I found out later who he was. Luca, Domenico's nephew, the son of his older brother, the one who had died. Domenico was raising him. This was not a coincidence. Domenico Valente had put the single most precious thing in his life in the same room as the single most precious thing in mine. It was not a threat. It was a bond. It was a silent, complex message of trust. We were making noise. The whispers from the church basement were getting out, and the Ravello group, the legal mafia, pushed back. First, a city health inspector appeared at Rossi's bakery. He was a small, angry man with a clipboard, claiming an anonymous tip about rodent contamination. Mr. Rossi, my boss, was a proud man. His bakery was spotless, but the inspector found a violation, a tiny crack in a floor tile. He shut us down for 48 hours. I lost 2 days of pay. Then came my landlord. He knocked on my door, a sweaty, nervous man I tried to avoid. He told me the rent was going up by 40%, effective the first of the month. "You cannot do that," I said, my hands gripping the door frame. "I can," he said, avoiding my eyes. "The building was just bought. New owners. Ravello Group." My blood froze. They knew where I lived. They were not just fighting Domenico. They were coming for me. That night, the car appeared, a dark sedan, parked across the street under the flickering sodium light, the same spot where Silas's sport utility vehicle had been. But this was not Silas. This car was patient. It was an insult. It sat there for 3 nights. It did not move. It just watched. I hung blankets over Maya's window. I barely slept. I did not call Domenico. I would not. I was his partner, not his dependent. On the 4th night, I was sitting in the dark, watching the car, when my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "The car will be gone in 5 minutes. Your rent is stable. Do not worry." I looked out the window. A heavy tow truck, big and official, was pulling up. The driver hooked the dark sedan. In less than 5 minutes, it was gone. The next day, my landlord knocked again. He was not nervous this time. He was terrified. "A mistake," he stammered, his face pale. "A management error. The rent stays as it is. My apologies." He ran down the stairs. Domenico. He was watching the watchers. He had not come to my door. He had not called. He was keeping his promise from a calculated distance. He was a storm wall, holding back the tide without touching my freedom. I hated that I felt a wash of gratitude. I hated that his remote, invisible protection felt safe. An electricity was building between us. It was not soft. It was not romantic. It was a simmering, dangerous understanding. He was a man who kept his word. We needed our final piece of proof. Nora and I went back to the storage unit, back to the tapes. We listened for hours, mostly. It was boring. Financial projections, property assessments, And then I found it. A tape labeled Newport. I put it in the player. A voice. Slick. Confident. A man I did not recognize. And he was talking to someone else. Laughing. "The Newport project will triple the value. We just have to clear the rats out of Southie. It does not matter. We have the permits. The city councilor signed off this morning." Nora grabbed my arm. Her nails dug in. "A city councilor. They are not just buying judges. They are buying the city council." The voice on the tape laughed again. "It is a good investment. A little money into his community fund, and he signs the eviction orders disguised as a waterfront revitalization." Revitalization, that was the word. It was money laundering. It was the forced eviction of an entire neighborhood, and we had him. We had the proof. Nora and I worked for a week. We cross-referenced the tape with the ledgers. We matched the payments to the judge with the dates of his rulings. We prepared the story. "We have to be careful," Nora said, her fingers flying over her keyboard. "We cannot print Valente's name. We cannot mention his involvement. If we do, this becomes a mafia turf war. The public will dismiss it. It will be bad guy versus bad guy." "It is not," I said. "This is about the law." "Exactly," she said. "So we source everything to concerned community members and leak documents. We give the federal investigator Domenico mention the financial trail. We give the public the human story. We hit them from both sides. Law, not revenge." She was right. This was not Domenico's fight. It was ours. He had simply supplied the weapons. The story was scheduled to run on Sunday. On Saturday night, I took Maya to a movie. We ate popcorn. She fell asleep on my lap. It was the first normal thing I had done in weeks. We got home late. I carried her up the 3 flights of stairs, her small body warm and heavy in my arms. I put my key in the lock. The deadbolt was not thrown. I always throw the deadbolt. My heart stopped. I pushed the door open. The apartment was cold. The window in the kitchen, the one with the bad latch, was wide open. The curtain was flapping in the freezing air. They had been here. I ran to Maya's cot, my sleeping child still heavy in my arms. I checked the apartment. The old television was still there. My cheap laptop was on the table. Nothing was stolen. They did not want my things. They wanted my fear. On the kitchen table, in the exact spot where the gold invitation had sat, was a single piece of paper. A note, made of letters cut from a magazine. "Do not turn your daughter's kindness into a funeral." I did not scream. I did not cry. I walked to the window and locked it. I bolted the door. I sat in my one good armchair, holding Maya, and I started to shake. I shook for an hour. They had been in my home. They had stood where my daughter sleeps. They had threatened her. My first thought was to run, to take Maya, pack a bag, and disappear. But where would we go, Ravello? With their clean suits and their legal teams, was everywhere, and if I ran, they would win. The assistant DA who framed me would win. The corrupt judge would win. The system that crushed people like me for business would win. I looked down at Maya's sleeping face, her integrity, her kindness. That was how this started. They thought it was my weakness. They thought they could use her to break me. I held her tighter. My shaking stopped. The fear did not go away. It crystallized. It turned into something hard and cold and sharp. It turned into fuel. I would not let them turn her goodness into a weapon. I would not let them make me afraid. I looked at the note, and I made a new promise. If I do not fight, I win. I whispered into the dark. I lose even while I am alive. I would not lose. The article Nora published on Sunday morning was not a story. It was a bomb. The headline stretched across the entire front page, the waterfront betrayal, how City Hall and the Ravello Group are selling Boston's soul. She had used the tapes, the ledgers, the stories from the church basement, so she named the corrupt judge. She named the city councilor. She painted a perfect legal picture of a corporate shark devouring a neighborhood. She never mentioned the name Valente. By Monday afternoon, the city was roaring. The district attorney, smelling a political firestorm he could not ignore, announced the formation of a grand jury. The city councilor, the man from the Newport tape, held a tearful press conference to announce he was stepping aside to spend more time with his family. The Ravello Group's polished glass headquarters was surrounded by news vans. They responded just as I knew they would. They hired the largest, most expensive law firm in Boston and issued a statement about vigorously defending their reputation against baseless smears. The phone call came that night. A Washington, D.C. number, a number I had not seen in 6 years. My hand was shaking. I answered. Elena. The voice was unchanged, smooth, confident, and wrapped in the armor of the law. Ethan Cole. Ethan. I kept my voice flat. Elena. I saw the news. I saw your name. They are quoting you. Are you insane? You are taking on the Ravello Group by yourself. They will bury you in litigation until you are 50. You know a lot about burying things. Ethan, you are an expert at it. He sighed. It was that impatient, lawyerly sound I remembered so well. Look, I am calling to help. These guys are not just developers. They are connected. You need real protection, legal protection, not whatever you are doing. I do not need anything from you, I said, the words cold and sharp. Elena, listen to me. I am at the Department of Justice now. I know this game. You are using a local reporter to fight a dragon. You need federal firepower. Why are you calling? Ethan, is your conscience finally bothering you? I am calling, he said, his voice lowering, because she is my daughter, too, and you are putting her in the direct line of fire. The hypocrisy of it, the sheer audacity, almost made me laugh. The day you chose a bigger case over your wedding, Ethan, justice left the room with you. We do not need your help. You are wrong, he said, and for the first time, I heard real urgency in his voice. They will use your past, the hospital. They will paint you as a disgruntled, drug-addicted ex-employee. Goodbye, Ethan. I hung up the phone. My heart was hammering. I hated him. I hated his voice. But I had listened. He said he was at the Department of Justice. He mentioned federal firepower. And he had given me something. He said, if you are serious, you need someone clean. You need Agent Marcus Riley. He's the only one in the Boston field office who is not on someone's payroll. I picked up my pencil. In the small notebook, I wrote the name, Marcus Riley. Ravello did not wait for their lawyers to win in court. They hit back. They hit back where they knew I lived. It happened on Wednesday. I was taking Maya to the playground near the church. It was a cold, bright afternoon. She was playing on the swings, her laughter sharp in the air. I was sitting on a bench, watching. I was always watching now. Silas was there. He was pretending to read a book on a bench near the gate. He was my shadow, a promise from Domenico. It happened so fast. Maya ran behind the big slide. I looked down at my phone for 1 second. 1 second, I looked up. She was gone. Maya. I stood up. My heart stopped. The playground was fenced in. She could not have left. Maya, I ran. I looked behind the slide. Empty. The swings were still moving slightly. A man was walking quickly toward the exit. A man in a gray tracksuit I did not recognize. He was not looking back. Maya, I screamed it. Then I saw Silas move. He was not a man reading a book. He was a blur. He moved across the playground in a way that was not human. He intercepted the man in the gray tracksuit at the gate. It was not a fight. It was a disassembly. Silas moved, and the man folded. He went down hard onto the pavement, his head hitting the asphalt with a sick sound. Silas did not stop. He was on top of him. Next, a car. The black sport utility vehicle. It screeched to a halt in the street. Domenico Valente got out. He was not wearing a sweater. He was in his charcoal suit. He ran past Silas. He ran past the man on the ground. He ran to the car. He wrenched open the back door, and he pulled Maya out. She was not crying. She was just still. Her eyes wide with shock. He wrapped her in his arms. He held her against his chest, his eyes closed, his hand stroking her hair. He just stood there, holding her. I could not move. My legs were water. He walked over to me. He did not let her go. He just looked at me, his eyes black holes of fury. 12 minutes, I whispered. I had been counting. She was gone for 12 minutes. Silas walked over, dusting his hands. The man on the ground was unconscious. He had a partner in the car. He grabbed her. I got the car. He got the man. Domenico looked at me, his face a mask of controlled rage. He looked at Silas. Find out who sent him, and then make them understand the mistake. He looked back at me. She is safe. She is safe. He finally handed her to me. I buried my face in her hair. She smelled like cold air and playground mulch. That night, I did something I had sworn I would not do. I called him. He put his hands on my daughter. I said, my voice shaking. It will not happen again, Elena. His voice was low, deadly. That is not good enough, I said. This cannot happen again. You hiding in the shadows, sending your tow trucks and your smoke man. It is not enough. They touched her because they think I am weak. They think I am your mistress or your charity case. What do you want? He asked. I want you to stop hiding. I want to use your power, but I want to do it in the light. No more shadow games. I want to meet your federal agent, and I have a name. Who? Agent Marcus Riley, my ex-husband, gave me the name. He said he is clean. There was a long silence. He is clean, Domenico finally said. And your ex-husband is smarter than I thought. A meeting. Tomorrow, my office. I will bring Riley. Agent Riley was a tall, tired-looking man. He did not look impressed by Domenico's office. He looked at me. I read Miss Alvarez's article. It is good, but it is not enough. I have been trying to get inside Ravello's finances for a year. Their books are clean. Their real books are in a storage unit in Southie. I said, I cannot use those. Riley said, a judge will throw it out. Fruit of the poisonous tree in Valente's tree. So we get new fruit, I said. Domenico looked at me, a flicker of curiosity in his cold eyes. Ravello is sponsoring the Boston Preservation Trust charity auction on Friday. I said I had seen the banners. They are the main sponsor, a man named Frank Russo. Their director of acquisitions is the keynote speaker. He is the man on the Newport tape. Riley shook his head. So he will give a speech about saving old buildings. He will also be selling tables, I said. And he will be taking special donations. I am going to go, and I am going to give him one. Riley leaned forward. You cannot be serious. You cannot wear a wire. I will not wear a wire. I said. I pulled a small, gaudy piece of costume jewelry from my pocket. A silver brooch, shaped like a flower. Silas gave me this. He called it a listening device. He has been teaching me. Domenico's expression did not change, but he looked at Silas, who was standing by the door. Silas just shrugged. "I will go," I said. "As Elena Hart, the single mother they are trying to crush, I will go to Russo, and I will say I am scared. I will say I want to make a donation to their community fund to make this all go away. I will ask him how to make a contribution, anonymously, the kind that washes things clean. He will never admit it." Riley said. "He will." I said. "He is arrogant. He thinks I am trash. He will brag about how the system works, and I will record it. And that will be your new fruit." The auction was a sea of black dresses and champagne. I walked in wearing my cleaning uniform. They tried to stop me, but I was Elena Hart, the woman from the newspaper. I was a curiosity. Frank Russo found me. He was slick, smiling, smelling of expensive cologne. "Miss Hart, you are very brave to be here." "I am not brave. Mr. Russo," I said, letting my voice shake. "I am terrified. I made a mistake. I did not understand." I touched the brooch on my lapel. "I want to fix it. I want to make a contribution to your special projects fund, the one from your Newport tape." His eyes went hard. Then he smiled. "You are smarter than you look? You want to buy peace. That is expensive." "How expensive?" I asked. "It is not about money." He laughed. "It is about the package. We move money for our partners. We put it in the preservation trust. It sits, then it comes out clean as a construction bond. It is beautiful." "You mean money laundering?" I whispered, playing dumb. He leaned in. "I mean revitalization, Miss Hart, and you just bought yourself a ticket." "I had it." I smiled. "Thank you. I will. I will think about it." The next day, Ravello's lawyers went nuclear. They released a statement. Elena Hart is a known associate of Domenico Valente. She's a woman of questionable morals, a fired drug user, and is acting as the spurned mistress in a mafia turf war. They thought they had me. I did not call Nora. I called the local community radio station, the biggest talk show in Southie. I went on the air. My voice was clear. I was not a mistress. I was not a spy. "My name is Elena Hart. I am a single mother. I was fired from my job because I was framed by a corrupt official working for the Ravello Group. My daughter, who's 6 years old, found a lost wallet. She returned it. The owner of that wallet, Mr. Valente, offered me a choice. He showed me the proof that I was framed. He showed me the proof that Ravello is poisoning our city. They are right. I am working with Mr. Valente, but we are not at war. We are just bringing the receipts." I told them everything. The rent hike, the car, the note, the 12 minutes my daughter was gone. Boston is a tough city. It does not like bullies, and it loves a real story. The switchboard lit up. They did not just believe me, they were furious for me. The wire I wore, it was not just for Russo. Agent Riley used the tape to get an emergency warrant, a full federal raid on Ravello headquarters. But Russo was smart. He knew the feds were coming. The call came from Silas. "They are not at the office. They are at the docks. Warehouse 4. They are burning the hard copies, the real ledgers." Nora and I were already in her car. We sped toward the waterfront. When we got there, it was chaos. The warehouse was dark, but we could see light flickering inside. Domenico was already there. His men, including Silas, were not fighting. They were containing. 2 of Ravello's men were trying to light barrels of paper on fire. Silas and his men were using fire extinguishers. They were not killing them. They were saving the evidence. "Nora the truck," I yelled. Nora backed her station wagon up to the loading dock. Domenico saw me. He did not yell. He just pointed. He and I, Silas and Nora, we formed a chain. We were pulling the bankers' boxes, the real ones, the ones from the storage unit, out of the fire. Domenico's men were holding Ravello's men at bay. Flames licked up the wall. The smoke was thick. Domenico tossed me a heavy box. "This is the last one." The fire was raging behind him. He was covered in soot, his blue sweater singed. "You do not need to be a hero." "Domenico," I yelled over the roar. He stopped. He looked at me, the firelight dancing in his eyes. He was not cold now. He was burning. "Kindness is not a strategy. Elena, it is identity." He threw the last box to me and turned to help Silas. We slammed the trunk shut, and then the night exploded in blue and red lights. Agent Riley and the FBI. They swarmed the warehouse. They arrested Russo. They arrested his men. They took our boxes. It was over. As the sun started to come up, painting the sky in a thin, silver light over the harbor, I stood on the dock. I was holding Maya's hand. I had brought her. I wanted her to see. Domenico walked over, and he was still covered in soot. He looked exhausted. He looked at Maya, then at me. I did not kiss him. I did not touch him. This was not that kind of story. We just stood there, watching the police lead the men in expensive suits away in handcuffs. I nodded. Once. He nodded back. It was a promise. Kept. The machinery of justice, once it was jump-started by federal warrants and public fury, began to grind. The grand jury indictments were swift. Frank Russo and the entire executive board of the Ravello Group were charged with fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy. The city councilor, seeing his political life evaporate, tried to make a deal. It did not save him. The housing court judge, the one who had been evicting families for years, announced an immediate retirement, citing family health concerns. It was the classic Boston exit, the quiet disappearance into a comfortable pension. But Agent Riley, the man Ethan had named, was not sentimental. 2 weeks later, the judge was indicted by the federal grand jury. It seemed that spending time with his family was a prelude to serving 10 to 15 years in a federal prison. I received my own, smaller piece of justice in the mail. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope from the board of directors at Boston Community Hospital. The assistant district attorney who had backdated my file had been forced to resign and was now facing his own investigation. The hospital, in a desperate attempt to distance itself from the scandal, had formally reviewed my case. The letter was full of legal, sterile language, expunged from your record, unfortunate error, full confidence. It ended with a formal apology and an offer my old job back, complete with back pay for the 2 years I had lost. 2 years, 2 years of my life, of smelling like burnt sugar and bleach, of counting quarters for the bus, of being the disgraced technician, all of it wiped away in a single paragraph. I held the letter, and I thought about it. I thought about the clean, quiet operating rooms, the steady paycheck, the respectability. I picked up a pen on a piece of Maya's drawing paper. I wrote a note. I accept your apology. I did not mention the job. I mailed it back to them. I was not the woman they had fired. I was not interested in going back to sleep. The neighborhood, however, was wide awake. The media, led by Nora, had given me a name I hated, the honest mother. It made me sound like a statue. When a local news anchor asked me how it felt, I told him the truth. My daughter was the honest one. I am just the one who figured out how to use a pencil. But the name and the story brought people. They came to the church basement, to the Friday night dinners, which were now less about secrets and more about strategy. The longshoremen, the nurses from my old hospital, the families who had won their homes back. They were safe, but they were not whole. They won. Elena, a fisherman named Tony, told me, his hands scarred from the nets. But we are still broke. They bled us for 2 years. What now? I looked at Nora. I looked at Father Michael. I pulled a drawing from my purse. It was the one Maya and Luca had painted, the blue bridge connecting the 2 sides of the river. Now, I said, we build a bridge. We started the Bridge Fund. It was not a charity. It was a community weapon, a nonprofit legal defense fund for the labor residents of the waterfront. We pooled our money to file class action lawsuits against the companies that had preyed on them. We started a job retraining program for people who had lost work. It was real. Nora, in her spare time, became our communications director, using her media contacts to keep our story alive. Father Michael, the only man in Boston trusted by both the sinners and the saints, became our treasurer. He managed every dollar. Domenico Valente stayed away. It was the smartest, most decent thing he could have done. His name, his money, would have poisoned us. It would have turned our fight for justice back into the mafia turf war Ravello had accused us of. So he kept his legal distance. He did not donate. He did not attend a meeting. He just managed the climate. The petty crime in our neighborhood evaporated. The city inspectors never came. The streets felt safer. He was providing a silent, invisible perimeter. He was giving us the one thing we needed to do our work, peace. His only visible contribution was to the art class. Father Michael announced one afternoon that an anonymous benefactor had endowed the children's art program for the next 5 years. There was enough money for a new kiln, for real canvases, for anything the children needed. Luca and Maya kept painting bridges. My past, however, was not as decent as my present. Ethan Cole called again. His voice was different this time. The legal arrogance was gone. He sounded tired. "Elena, I am in Boston for the weekend. I would like to see her. Please." I thought about the man who had left me. I thought about the man who had, in the end, given me the name that saved us. "All right, Ethan, Sunday, after the service. We have a community coffee hour in the basement. You can see her there. I will be present." "In a church basement, Elena. I was hoping to—" "That is the offer," I said, my voice flat. "You get to visit. You do not get to disrupt. You want to see her. You come to our world." He came. He looked out of place in his expensive Washington coat. Maya, who had not seen him in years, treated him like a polite stranger. He brought her a doll that probably cost $300. She thanked him, and then went back to playing with Luca. Ethan watched me as I worked the funds table, signing people up, talking to lawyers. He saw the files. He saw the work. He was, above all, a lawyer. He understood what we were doing. "This is impressive, Elena," he said, holding his coffee cup. "You are actually moving the needle." "We are," and I said. He took a breath. "You need help. Real corporate filing help. Pro bono? This structure is a mess. Let me—" I looked at him. He needed this. He needed to balance his own ledger. "Fine. You can review our incorporation papers from Washington. You can be our pro bono counsel. But your work stays with the fund. This is not about us. It is not about you and me." "I know," he said. "It is just, waity, about the work." It was his penance. The new world was safer, but I was not naive. Ravello was gone, but the world was full of men like them. Silas found me as I was leaving the church. "The immediate threat is neutralized," he said, his voice as flat as ever. "But you are visible now. Visibility is a vulnerability." "I cannot hide, Silas," I said, pulling my coat tight. "I'm not suggesting you hide. I'm suggesting you harden. Mister, Valente has authorized me to teach you to shoot." He held up a key. "He has a private range." I looked at the key. I thought of the fire. I thought of the rage I saw in Russo's eyes. I thought of my daughter. But I shook my head. No. I do not want to become that. I do not want a gun in my house. Silas nodded slowly, as if he had expected that. Good. A gun is a loud solution. It is better to avoid the problem, the art of not being there. What does that mean? It means, he said, I will teach you how to be smart, not violent. So, twice a week, in the church gymnasium, Silas taught me. He taught me how to break a grip, how to use my elbow as a weapon, how to walk into a room and instantly know the exits. He taught me how to see trouble before it started. He was, in his own quiet way, teaching me his religion. Life found a rhythm. The fund won its first small settlement. Autumn deepened into a cold, sharp winter. One night, I was working late in the basement, finalizing the paperwork for our first job training cohort. I went upstairs to lock the church doors. The sanctuary was dark. Only the rows of votive candles in their red glass holders were burning. A man was standing there, a tall silhouette against the flicker. It was Domenico. He was wearing his heavy wool coat, the one from the photograph in his wallet. He was not looking at me. He was standing in front of the small alcove dedicated to St. Anthony, the patron of lost things. He lit a long taper and touched it to a new, unlit candle. "I did not know you were a praying man," I said. My voice was quiet in the huge, empty space. He did not turn. He just watched the new flame catch. "I'm not, but my mother was, and my brother. He liked this one." He was silent for a long moment. I felt like I was intruding, like I was standing on holy ground that was not mine. "My brother," he said, his voice low. "Luca's father. He was not like me. He was gentle. He was the one who was supposed to go to college." I stood still. "He died," Domenico said, his eyes fixed on the flame. "When he was 20, an overdose. He got in with a bad crew. They were pushing opioids into the neighborhood, the same kind of trash Ravello was protecting at your hospital. The same kind of poison." I finally understood. The hospital, the vendetta against Ravello. It was not business. It was not strategy. It was personal. It was the only way he knew how to avenge the brother he could not protect. He finally looked at me. His eyes were not cold. They were just deep. An ocean of old, settled grief. "We have the community dinner tomorrow night," I said, my voice soft. "In the basement. We are making bean soup." He looked at me, as if my words were from a different language. "It is an invitation, Domenico," I said. "A safe dinner, a different life." He came. He walked down the stairs into the loud, bright basement, and for a second, the room went absolutely silent. Then, just as quickly, the noise rushed back in. He was just another man from the neighborhood. He sat at our table, me, him, Maya, and Luca. Father Michael joined us. We ate the simple soup out of styrofoam cups. It was hot, and it was good. I watched Maya show Luca how to crush crackers into his soup. She was laughing. I looked at Domenico. He was watching them. A small, unreadable expression on his face. "I was so scared," I said quietly. "Just for him. That day at the playground, the 12 minutes she was gone. I thought I was going to die. I could not breathe." He stopped eating. He put his spoon down. He looked at his own hands, resting on the card table. "I was scared too," he said. It was the simplest, most honest thing I had ever heard. I looked at him. I looked at our children. I did not know what to call this thing between us. It was not love. It was not romance. It was not any of the words from the movies. It was just decent. It was two people who did not fit, sitting at a wobbly table in a church basement, eating bean soup. It was a relationship that had not started with a lie, but with an act of integrity. It was built on kindness, and it was real. A year is a long time. It is long enough for snow to melt, for grass to grow, and for the steel skeleton of a corrupt high-rise to be torn down. I know, because I watched it happen. The waterfront was breathing again. The Ravello group was gone. Buried under federal indictments and civil suits, their half-finished luxury tower, a monument to their greed, was dismantled. The new city council, with the old corrupt members voted out, had rezoned the entire district. It was now slated for mixed-income housing. A new public park was being built right where the burning warehouse had stood. The Bridge Fund, which had started in a church basement with soup and secrets, was now a real, funded, operational nonprofit. We had, in the last 12 months, legally stopped the eviction of 50 families. We had won 2 major class action settlements. We were, as Nora put it, a systemic solution to a systemic problem. I had quit the bakery. I still cleaned offices at night. It was quiet, and it let me think. But my days were spent at the fund, buried in paperwork, organizing and fighting. The invitation was not on gold cardstock. It was on the official, heavy bond of the city of Boston, embossed with the city seal. They were inviting me, Elena Hart, to be a keynote speaker at the annual City Community Summit. They were calling me a community leader. I stood at the podium in the old hall at Faneuil Hall. The room was full of suits, activists, and reporters. Nora was in the front row, grinning. Father Michael was beside her, his arms crossed, looking proud. I wore my best blouse, the one I had bought secondhand. My voice did not shake. I did not talk about vengeance. I did not talk about fear. I talked about patience. I talked about evidence. I talked about the fact that a neighborhood is not a collection of buildings, but a collection of promises. I told them that kindness is not a weakness, but a compass. When I finished, they stood. The applause was loud. It was a strange, warm sound. But my eyes were not on the crowd. They were on the back of the room. He was there. Domenico Valente was leaning against the heavy oak doors, his hands in the pockets of his dark coat. He was not applauding. He was just watching me. He was, as always, a silent, walking promise, a shadow that proved the light was real. Afterward, people crowded me. They wanted to shake my hand. They wanted to tell me their stories. I was smiling, my face aching from it, when I felt a small, urgent tug on my sleeve. It was Maya. She was 7 now, and she looked serious. "Mommy," she said, her voice low, "a man gave me this for you." My stomach did its old, familiar drop. The crowd, the noise, it all faded. "What man? Honey, where?" "I do not know," she said, pointing vaguely. "He was nice. He just said to give this to you when you were done speaking." It was a simple, like a plain white envelope, no name, no markings. I stepped away from the crowd, into a quiet alcove. My hands were trembling slightly. I opened the flap. Inside was a single photograph. It was old. The colors faded to a soft yellow, the corners rounded with time. It was a picture of 2 women. They were young, maybe in their early 20s, wearing the crisp, white uniforms of nurses. They were standing arm in arm, smiling, in front of what looked like a hospital entrance. I gasped. One of them was my mother. I had this picture. I knew it well. She looked so young, so full of life. But I had never really looked at the other woman, the other nurse. She had dark hair, pulled back neatly, and a bright, beautiful smile. But her eyes, they were deep, watchful, familiar. I turned the photograph over. On the back, in faint, elegant blue ink, someone had written a short sentence. "Elena, the truth started with your mother." I turned it back over, staring at the face of the second nurse. My heart was hammering, a slow, deep drumbeat. "Who is that?" Domenico's voice. He had crossed the entire hall. He was standing beside me, his shoulder almost touching mine. He was not looking at me. He was staring at the photograph in my hand. He looked frozen. "My mother," I whispered, my finger pointing to the woman I knew, Elena Sr., but I do not know who the other woman is. "Maria," he whispered. His voice was rough, choked. Her name was Maria. He reached out, his finger slowly, almost reverently, tracing the face of the other nurse, the one with the dark hair and the deep eyes. "That," he said, "is my mother." The room tilted. I leaned against the wall. My mother, his mother, standing side by side, arm in arm. "Boston Community Hospital," I said, the words catching in my throat. They worked together. This was before your brother, before," he said. He nodded, still looking at the picture. All this time, the hospital, the framing, the opioids, the reason he had helped me, the reason our lives had become entangled, it was not a coincidence. It was not a random act of fate that Maya found his wallet. It was an echo. It was a debt, passed down from a generation before, from 2 women in white uniforms who had, perhaps, made their own promises in that same building. Domenico took the photo from my hand, his gaze intense. He looked at it for a long, silent minute. The noise of the reception, the applause, it all seemed a mile away. He finally looked up from the image and met my eyes. His were not cold. They were not the eyes of a boss or a shadow. They were just the eyes of a man who had just found a piece of his own lost history. "It seems," he said, his voice very low, "that maybe we owed each other a dinner from 15 years ago." I felt a real smile, a slow, warm one, touch my lips, the fear I'd lived with for so long, the anger that had fueled me. It was gone. It was replaced by this strange, quiet, impossible understanding. "I only accept invitations," I said softly, "that do not come with knives hidden in the salad." He almost smiled, a real, genuine movement of his lips. "We will only bring spoons." The past had one last piece to settle. Ethan called me that night. His voice on the phone sounded distant. "I saw the speech, Elena. It was streamed. You did it. You actually won." "We won," I corrected him. "The community won." "Right," he said. He paused. "Look, I am moving. The firm offered me a permanent position in Washington, D.C. I am taking it." "Good for you, Ethan," I said, and I meant it. "But the fund," he said, rushing his words as if he was afraid I would hang up. "I want to stay on. As remote counsel, pro bono. Of course. I like the work. It feels clean," I offered. "Yes," he said. "It is the only clean work I am doing right in my life." I thought about it. The white-hot rage I used to feel when I heard his voice was gone. He was just a man, a flawed, distant man, trying to balance his own ledger. The past did not have to be a weapon. It could be useful. "All right, Ethan," I said, my voice all business. "Send the fund your new contact information. We have a deposition with the new developers next week. I expect you to review the briefs." "Of course," he said, sounding relieved. "Thank you, Elena." I hung up. It was not forgiveness, it was just settled. That night, I sat at my kitchen table. It was the same table, in the same apartment, but the room felt bigger. The single fluorescent light did not buzz anymore. I had finally had it fixed. I opened my journal, the little pencil-filled notebook Silas had given me. It was full. I had filled 2 more since then. On the last page, I wrote a final entry. "Kindness is not weakness. It is not a soft, sentimental thing. It is a compass. It is the only thing that can lead you through the mud when the whole world is trying to make you drown." I closed the book. I went to check on Maya. She was fast asleep, her breathing deep and even. On her small desk, under her reading lamp, was her latest drawing. It was the bridge, the one she and Luca were always painting. But this one was different. On the bridge, she had drawn 4 people, 2 small ones, holding hands in the middle. On either side, a large one, an adult. The bridge itself was not just crayon. She had cut up strips of brown paper from a grocery bag. She had glued them on, one by one, like planks of wood. She had told me what they were. "It is a new bridge, Mommy," she had said, her eyes bright. "It is made of all the wood they pulled out of the old docks, the wood that did not burn." Reclaimed wood kept promises. I kissed her forehead. I went back to the kitchen. I picked up my phone. I had a new text message. From him. "Luca misses Maya. We should take them to the aquarium." I smiled. I typed my reply. "Dinner, Thursday, my place. Bring spoons." I hit send. I watched the small screen. A moment later, a small word appeared under my message. "Seen." I looked out my window. The snow was not falling. It was a clear, cold night. The lights of South Boston were steady. The city was breathing. And so was I. Thank you all so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where in the world you are tuning in from. Please, leave a comment below, share your thoughts, and let's connect. Do not forget to subscribe to Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and give that hype button a press so more people can discover this story.